Srineth of the Congress, who's joining us. We've heard from the opposition. We've heard from the government. We can get a word from the opposition. Those are images from a little earlier of Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman at the gate of the Parliament building, going in with her team as she presents her budget. Supriya, the worst from the pandemic perspective is most likely, and God willing, hopefully behind us. Would you then say that, from the opposition's perspective, the problem could be that this is where the Indian economy could potentially take off from? The last 2 years have been tough, but given all the shocks the economy has had to deal with, we could be on a path to growth from here, and which would, in some time, have the government be able to show pretty high growth numbers, as we're seeing high export numbers and high tax collections right now.
No, so thank you very much for having me, and I take objection to the fact that the opposition will have any issues with economic recovery. Of course, there should be economic recovery. Why wouldn't there be economic recovery? The issue is the government focusing on economic recovery, and what exactly is it doing about it? I will only point 4 things to you that this budget should focus on. Number 1 has to be employment creation, and employment has to come from the small, medium-sized enterprises. They have to be the focus. So employment generation, curbing inflation, agriculture. Remember, this budget is coming after a huge agriculture unrest in this country. And of course, the rising income inequality, the concentration of wealth in the hands of very, very few people. But it looks like, at least the economic survey seems to indicate that all is well, and the government is still in denial about the very fault lines that exist in the economy. I will only point out that everybody wants economic recovery, but is the government willing to walk the talk? Is the government willing to focus on the bottom of the pyramid, on the small, medium enterprises, which are the real job guzzlers? The action doesn't seem to be meeting the words right now. And I also want to point out that in the last budget, the agri and allied industries actually got less allocation than the previous budget. I hope there will be a larger allocation, because this was the month, February was the month when agriculture income was supposed to be doubled. The average farmer is today earning 27 rupees a day. The average unemployment in the country is higher than ever before. So what is the government willing to do about these structural issues which have come to plague? And I joined a little earlier, and you guys were discussing about how Nirmala Sitharaman enjoys the confidence of the Prime Minister. She very well does. I admire her as a woman to be in a very powerful position that she is, but she doesn't seem to enjoy the confidence of investors or the consumers, because consumption is down and investment is down. And unless you do not put that virtuous cycle of motion back, it is not going to revive the Indian economy. Indian economic revival depends on consumption and on investments coming back, and for that you need an income boost. You need a Nyaya-like Yojana. There is no other way about it. Over the short term, of course over the medium to long term, jobs have to come back into the center of focus. The economic survey, if you ask me, belies hopes of that talk being walked today.
Okay. We're just receiving word that the union budget has been approved by the cabinet, and in a short while from now will be presented on the floor of the House by Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman. This whole challenge of job creation is indeed one of the biggest challenges that Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman will deal with, and one of the aspects that's coming out strong is that the government has limited maneuverability in being able to create jobs by itself, and therefore Udayan, your thoughts on how the Finance Minister should be dealing with the challenge of job creation? What can the government possibly do to stimulate job creation to the extent possible in the private sector, and also as far as different government departments and ministries are concerned?
Not as much as we would like to believe, Rahul. It's very specious to say that the Finance Minister will do something which will automatically create a lot of jobs, because India has a jobs problem. It's best to recognize that. India also has very limited fiscal space. Our debt to GDP is running close to 90%. With that kind of a debt to GDP and the kind of interest payments you have to make, you don't have a lot of elbow room to go about creating millions of jobs. You can do 2 things. You can address, one hand, the SME problem that we've all been speaking about, because that is a real creator of jobs, and I'm sure something will be done in this budget on that front. The real creator of jobs in this country is actually the corporate sector. For that, you basically create an enabling environment, which is what the government has been doing. I mean, they've cut corporate taxes to 25%, which is the first step in inducing companies to go out and spend on capex. Now, companies do capex, as I was saying yesterday, when they have a virtuous profit cycle. We are just at the beginning of a good earnings cycle. Give it a few more quarters, and companies will probably have the confidence to come and spend again, and you will then have a capex cycle. The other is capacity utilization, which is nudging 70-75% in many industries. If that inches up to 80%, then companies will find the confidence to increase capacity and more jobs will be created. The government has done tax cuts. It is doing PLI. PLI might be a source of creation of jobs again. And then there are other things like the National Infrastructure Pipeline, which, if it is pulled off, can be a big creator of jobs. So enable the corporate sector, do something directly on the SME front, and maybe some jobs will be created. But as I said earlier, the government is only 2.5% of India's GDP in terms of capex. It can only nudge the wheel so much. So keep your expectations low. I think it's best to focus on MSMEs for this budget.
Sanjeev Bajaj joins us, Managing Director and Chairman of Bajaj Finserv. One of the things that's come out in the economic survey is on credit offtake. And your thoughts, Mr. Bajaj, on what Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman should be doing to try and get more companies in the private sector to actually go and borrow more so that they can go out and invest in new greenfield projects?
If you actually see, the credit offtake has been reasonably good with the MSME, the SME sector. And we also at CI recently did a survey where over 50% of our members who were surveyed mentioned that they'd already started investing in a new capex cycle, which means over the next 3-4 quarters, you see the benefit of that coming in. And all this is only happening because the larger situation around us is getting more stable in this pandemic. We can see in this current wave, it's been handled really well. Healthcare is all in place, and the vaccination rates have finally come to a very high level. And as a result, there is less disruption in the individual citizens' life, in the lives of businesses. This creates greater confidence, and it helps with the consumption cycle. It helps demand increase. And we need to see a continuation of this. So I hope that we see a continuation in the focus on healthcare, anticipating the next wave, getting ready ahead in time, whether with the right medical advice, getting boosters to more of the population, mix and match, the next set of therapeutics, proactively working with these companies so that we get ready for a possible another wave. And this main thing is to avoid the disruption, minimize the disruption like has been handled so well in this particular wave. In addition, government should continue its spend on infrastructure. And as we do this, private sector capex will also kick in. As I mentioned, we should continue to see good growth.
Sanjeev, you actually have operations in many small cities across the country in rural and semi-urban areas. What is your sense of the kind of labor issues or unemployment problem out there, and what would be your recipe for the finance minister to try and address that? But that's because that seems to be a very real problem over the last couple of years, which has only gotten worse.
You know, that's actually something that is so important, because as you go to smaller cities, we set up branches, offices in smaller cities. For us to get quality manpower that don't just have a degree, but they know how to work, becomes a big challenge. And also, when you look at the youngsters over there, they've done their education, but they just don't know how to work in a formal institutional setup. So there is this big gap, and that's why as CI, we've always focused on skill building. We think the government needs to review its skill building plans, put a lot more focus on that, bring in additional capacity and quality. Everybody does not need to go and become a startup and a CEO in a large company. There are a whole bunch of jobs that can be done at the front end that can give employment to hundreds of millions of Indians. They just need to be trained correctly. So I believe this is a big need. It's something that government, public sector, private sector, all need to invest their money and do this because it's something that takes time to do to get the quality right, to build capacity, but it will also give us the long-term benefit, the manpower, employment, and all the other positives that go with it.
Now, you have a terrific collection mechanism at Bajaj Finance, but you also have the pulse of what the retail mood is like, Sanjeev. So tell me, given the fact that incomes have been hit so badly over the last couple of years and the unemployment issues linger, as you yourself said, is there a delinquency problem which is looming for the retail of the consumer segment over the next year or so? Could that start to creep into the banking system stealthily? Because people are not talking about it. We are celebrating the fact that we have seen the worst of the NPA cycle. But could something like a retail NPA cycle start to manifest itself given the way incomes have been hit at the lower end of the pyramid?
So very clearly, as you're mentioning, it was at the lower end of the pyramid that incomes got hit. It was the informal sector, and that's where the government provided support through the moratorium year before last, and through the second wave where there was no such moratorium. Actually, lenders did reasonably well because they had provided for it. They had gone and raised capital. And a large amount of that NPAs actually flew through for many of us through last year. Interestingly, though, when you go one or two segments up and see the middle class consumption, almost nobody in the middle class lost jobs. Companies continue to employ them, continue to pay them. Maybe increments didn't come in year before last. Last year has been reasonably decent, and the middle class has started spending. So that has added a positive spin to this whole thing. And even when I see the last couple of months, and especially January through this pandemic, since, as I mentioned earlier, the pandemic on the ground has been handled very well. We are continuing to see good momentum, especially in urban India. Rural India in the last couple of months has slowed down, and the government needs to focus on that. And as you correctly mentioned, that even in urban India, focus on those at the lower end of the income segment.
Rahul?
In a way, comes, as we've been saying, Mr. Bajaj, at a time when perhaps the government can breathe a little bit more easily than they could in the last 2 years because of the pandemic. The fact that large parts of the adult population are vaccinated should give some cause for comfort. Do you believe, therefore, that the opportunity this time is there to send out much stronger signals than we could in the last 2 years to actually get growth on, back to where we would have liked to see it even pre-pandemic? At the moment, the comparison is to 2020 February. We would like to see the comparison possibly to a pre-2017 India, or some of us would like to see it. Do you see that happening?
I absolutely hope so, and the confidence comes from the fact that last year, given the situation, was a good budget. We can see the benefit of that coming in. Our fiscal deficit hopefully will turn out to be lower than what was anticipated. We have seen that indirect tax and direct tax collection has been strong, which shows that the economy is humming, coming back. The investments that the government has been making in infrastructure and what it has started making in healthcare are also positives. And yes, as you said, we have to keep building on this because as the government continues to build on this, private sector investment is coming back. So you're going to see a multiplier effect as a result of this in the coming years.
Pranab Satya, Chair at FICCI Committee on Taxation, partner and national leader with us at the moment. Pranab, are you joining us at this moment? No, I don't think he's with us. Pranab, you want to tell us from a taxation perspective what you're looking at in this budget? I think you're on mute, Pranab. You'll have to unmute yourself. Can you hear?
In this budget is stability. From a direct tax standpoint in particular and overall from a taxation standpoint, I think right now the mood of the country is good and nothing should be done which would probably upset that. Yes, there could be a few things like promoting private capex For example, extending the concessional tax rate of 17% till 25 because of the pandemic the last 2 years has not enabled companies to invest and start new projects or bring it to such a stage that they can start production before March 23. So we think that's one good thing that could be done very clearly. Also, what we believe is that a lot of fillip is possible for capex, and particularly in the green energy and new emerging space. And that's where we feel some SOPs or some incentives could probably help. But by and large, our mood right now is to promote innovation, R&D efforts, green energy, and overall to see how the environment can be kept as stable, predictable, so that industry gets the confidence to invest, which I think is the need of the hour. And once that happens and that kicks in, I think there will be enough growth and employment generation to lift the entire economy to newer heights.
We just have I want to take you through how the sectoral spends have been under Finance Minister Sitharaman, and it will be interesting to see what her focus really has been. Udayan spoke about education not getting the kind of priority that it should over the last 2 years, especially as children have been locked up at home. Now, as schools start reopening, the need to ensure that education gets a boost. If you see, from about FY20 to now, which is the budget estimate, you've had a pretty flat line on education. So it was 67.2 thousand crore rupees in FY16 to FY22, which is 93.3 thousand crore rupees. There hasn't been a significant uptick. It's a rather flat line. Let's come to healthcare. In healthcare, because of the allocations made for the purchase of vaccines, there was an increase in the last year. But if you look at the trend line from a longer perspective, healthcare spending has been going up, but not quite the way that you'd want in a country like India, given the kind of challenges that we saw at a time like the pandemic. Let's now look at some of the critical infrastructure projects. Now, I'll take roads, for example, which now seem to be plateauing. Under Nitin Gadkari, for the initial years of the Modi Sarkar, the speed at which new road networks were being built every year was very high. Just over the last few months, partly because of the COVID lockdowns, also because of Omicron, the speed at which we are building highway capacity has actually slowed down. And that's something that we need to look at. Is that now the new trend? Have we built enough roads, or is that just a temporary blip caused by the pandemic? Let's look at railway infrastructure. Again, when it comes to railway infrastructure, this is the operating ratio at 96.2. Remember, now you've got the railway budget, which is part of the general budget. There isn't a separate railway budget as there used to be before Prime Minister Modi came in, and that's been one of the big changes that he's made, where there's just one combined statement of accounts. This is power generation at 392 gigawatts. These are the numbers till the 31st of December, an increase from about 298 in FY16. Let's look at Manrega, where I'll take a look first at funds released by the government for the Manrega scheme. And when he was in the opposition, Prime Minister Modi called this a monumental testimony to the UPA's failures. He has been increasing allocations year after year from FY16, especially FY21, seeing 1.11 lakh crore rupees being given. Till the 30th of January in this year, 76.6 thousand crore rupees have been spent. Let's look at the effective wage rates, the amount of money a Manrega worker makes, which was 154 rupees in FY16, going up to 180 in FY20. Then currently, as of the 30th of January, 205.3 rupees. So an increase of about 50 rupees in the last 6 years in the average wage rate on Manrega. Let's look at the employment numbers now. This is the average days of employment each person received, which is currently at 46.2. It was 48.9 in FY16. Let's take a look at some of the Prime Minister's pet schemes. This is what will give you a broad sense of where we're at currently, where we've been over the last few years. I'll start with the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, where 7.5 thousand crore rupees were allocated in FY16. In FY21, 12,300 crore rupees were allocated. For the next 5 years, 1.41 lakh crore rupees have been allocated. By looking at these numbers, Udayan, your sense between Ujjwala, Swachh Bharat, Ayushman Bharat, Awas Yojana, your sense of where the Prime Minister's priorities, where the Finance Minister's priorities when it comes to these pet schemes really is most likely to be?
You know, you have to separate the two, Rahul. I mean, we are talking about revenue expenditure on one hand and capital expenditure on another hand. When we started the year in the FY21 budget, the Finance Minister said that she will focus more on capital expenditure. What you spoke about just now, things like roads, railways, defense, I mean, and housing, that's the bulk of capital expenditure. She said that capital expenditure will go up 26% and revenue expenditure, Narega, Prime Minister schemes, etc., those will actually go down 5%. What actually happened is that revenue expenditure, all these schemes, because of COVID and the need for relief, that actually went up 8%, and we have not spent as much as on capital expenditure as we thought at the start of the year. So broadly speaking, CapEx is basically growth oriented, simplifying it, and RevEx is relief oriented. RevEx actually did well in 2022 and CapEx did not do as well, though it's better than pre-COVID years. So this year we have to see whether we dial back revenue expenditure a little bit from the schemes that you're talking about and focus more on shoring up capital expenditure on things like roads, railways, which have job creation possibilities and multiplier possibilities, and where the thrust would be. Would it be roads? Would it be defense? Would it be housing? Because of the total capex kitty, roads, railways and defense make up 80%. The rest is housing and other things. So what will actually be the biggest job creation avenues? And that's the one I will be looking forward to in the budget very, very closely. But I'm told that Vinayak Chatterjee has joined in and he's actually an expert on this subject. Vinayak, are you with us now?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Right. I wanted to ask you, what do you think is the best way of capex expenditure? I mean, if the finance minister says that she will increase capex by 25, 27% or 30% this year, what would you want the thrust of that capex to be on?
You know, this year, I would actually expect the thrust to be on water. Because the program Jal Jeevan Mission is actually one of the most powerful utilities connectivity program since independent India to give potable tap water. And the ministry has done a commendable job in planning out the entire aspect of 24/7. And I think, like for the 2024 elections, what rural roads and gas cylinders and stuff did for winning goodwill towards the government, pipe water is going to be the single biggest driver of goodwill from Aam Aadmi, from Bharat. So I'm actually expecting a far higher allocation to water than the standard road rail mix in the past. But let me stop here.
The only reason we are stopping you is because we've got just a couple of minutes to go for the budget announcement. But Vinayak Chatterjee, you know, there is a sense that we have these outlays, but we've got to also look at outcomes. Mr. Modi has often spoken about, you know, that judge me by outcomes, not by outlays. The time has come for that in critical sectors, health, education, which have taken a hit in pandemic times. You know, social sector spending needs to be matched by outcomes in those critical areas.
I obviously, nobody can disagree with you on that statement, but I will have to say that while social sector outcomes are eagerly watched, there are many sectors in core infrastructure where the outcomes are very clearly positive and visible. Roads has just had a temporary blip, but we are operating between 35 to 40 kilometers a day, which is astounding by world standards. So forget the temporary blip of COVID and rains and all that. If you see railway electrification and railway projects going very well, if you see Nal Se Jal, Jal Jeevan Mission going very well. So there are these outcomes that are pretty decent in core infrastructure. In social infrastructure, I completely agree with you that we will have to renew our focus on outcomes. There is no question that we have to do that.
Okay, just a couple of minutes to go, Rahul. as I said, this is a budget where Nirmala Sitharaman has the opportunity to, in a sense, set us on the post-pandemic road back to growth.
And it's interesting that you mentioned it, because what the economic survey clearly brings out to them, that the government has headroom to spend because of healthy GST collections, and I'll show that to you on the budget intelligence dashboard. Because of healthy tax collections as well, the government has the spending power, which typically it struggles for. And the challenge here instead is that they haven't spent enough, partly because of the lockdowns, partly because of the pandemic. So the FY22 is in the yellow color, so 1.38 lakh crores, the highest collection so far. And if you look at the trend line, this is in previous years, and the line right on top is the line for FY22, which suggests that tax collections are up, and that it'll be interesting to see where the government decides to prioritize. Vinayak Chatterjee made an important point that water will be critical, and that will be interesting for us to look at. Here we see Om Birla, the Speaker of the Lok Sabha, come in. Udayan, final thoughts as we get set to hear Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman.